Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Building an Enterprise Level System with Xero series. And today's episode of Scale Your Approvals Process as a Bigger Team. I'm just going to give people a couple of seconds to filter through, and then we will get started. I'm so thrilled to be joined by the fantastic panel that we have for you today. So I'm itching for us to get to their insights. Just to signpost you to, there's the Q&A option in the instructions, so please do fire through any and all questions on there. The plan for today, we'll do our intros, we'll then get into our discussion of approvals process in Scaling with Xero. We'll talk what's coming up over the remaining 2 webinars in the series. That'll take us to the full half hour. And then there'll be Q&A as bonus content on top of that. Just to kick things off. So my name's David Tuck. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Mayday. Our mission is to mend month end, starting with the needs of multi-entity businesses, intercompany recharges, cross-entity bank reconciliation, keeping intercompany loans in balance. I started my career as an accountant, qualifying at Deloitte. I headed up a succession of startup and SME finance teams. I've twice been the finance leader of a Xero using multi-entity business. And with this series, really trying to create the resource that I wish I'd had as a Xero using finance leader around how best to scale with Xero into our growth phase as a business. I've been an accounting tech entrepreneur for the last decade now. I was previously the founder at Chaser, the accounts receivable software. And in terms of this series, so at Mayday, which I've been building for the last couple of years with my co-founder Griff and our fantastic team. So we're for larger Xero users. The majority of our customers are in-house finance teams. And the questions we found they kept coming back to were, is Xero still the right system for me? And if yes, how long? Indefinitely, or what will be the point that I outgrow it? And the nature of uncertainty is that when we don't know something, it leads us to act earlier. The ERP move, as one of our customers described it, is horrible and hectic. It's incredibly expensive with the associated consulting fees. And that's all before 58% of ERP implementations fail. So we've got this idea of peace of mind, the peace of mind of knowing, for how long, and the fact that I can scale with Xero into my growth phase. This series is very much against the backdrop of how can we be useful to our target customer. It's not product marketing. It's not how to build a best-in-class app stack. It's the reason I'm not wearing a Mayday t-shirt for any of these webinars. It's about writing the misconception that it's not possible to grow with Xero into one's growth phase. But it's not about replacing that misconception with another one, that Xero is this all-singing, all-dancing panacea that any and all businesses can scale with indefinitely. So we also want to touch on when there are the right time to move to an ERP system. That's quite enough from me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by our fantastic panel today. So, Gabriel, I'm going to come to you first to introduce yourself.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Hi, David, and the fellow panelists and all the attendees. So I'm Gabriel. I am the head of finance for the Lost Explorer. Our company is basically a producer and distributor of mezcal, which is one delicious spirit made from agave. So we produce in Mexico. We distribute around the world. We're currently distributing our product in 20 different countries, and in our organizational and trading structure, we have 5 legal entities, which I oversee all of them, together with my finance team, which is based in Mexico. I myself, I'm actually based in the Netherlands, where we have our holding entity for the whole group. So it's a pleasure being with you guys today.
Amazing. Brilliant to have you here, Gabriel. Hilary, over to you.
Hello, yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Hilary Dyson. I'm the founder and one of the owners of Bridge Financials. We are accountants specializing in systems based around Xero and integrated apps. The eagle-eyed amongst you might spot sort of all the bridges and so on in our branding. So we are based in Scotland, but we work throughout the UK and actually overseas as well. Beauty of cloud accounting. Bridge Financials was set up because we felt that there was a real need for people to get the most out of their cloud-based systems. So that's why we set Bridge Financials up, and we work with people to really maximize what they can get from Xero plus associated apps.
Incredible. Brilliant to have you here, Hilary. Thank you so much. Alex, over to you.
Thank you so much, David, and hi, everyone. My name is Alex Keselman. I'm a solutions engineer at ApprovalMax, and I've been at ApprovalMax, I think, for about 5 years now, so sort of like a part of the local furniture. But just to give a few words about what is ApprovalMax and what do we do on this market. ApprovalMax is a award-leading platform for your financial controls. So we're allowing our customers to build smart workflows for approving their accounts payable, account receivable, and some additional things like batch payments, for instance. I, by the way, have seen one of the questions in the Q&A, so I'm answering that straight away. And my role in that organization would be to hear what are the challenges our customers are facing, trying to understand what's in there and how we can actually implement some specific processes and how we can build the workflow specifically for them, making sure that everything is fulfilled and they have automated things and an automated process for their accounts payable side or accounts receivable side.
Amazing. And so, to kick off the discussion, I'm going to boomerang back to Alex first off. When we talk scaling your approvals process as a bigger team, you already touched on it there on the sort of the AR and the AP side, but I'd love you to anchor our discussion. What do we mean by scaling your approvals process as a bigger team?
Sure, that's a very good question. It's actually quite a philosophical one. It's no surprise that the financial controls within any organization would be a crucial part of it. Otherwise, it would be just a chaos. However, at the same time, whenever we think about the financial controls, we think about some very complex systems. And most of the users, most of the companies out there, they're still using some outdated, redundant way of their financial controls. Some are still using paper, printing out all of their bills, trying to find the person from the team who would actually approve it, or some just simply using emails. Whenever your team is getting larger, the challenge is getting a bit more complex. And what we are thinking internally in ApprovalMax, that financial controls should be easy. And for that, there's so many tools, so many third-party applications going with Xero, QuickBooks Online, or Connect with whatever, any ERP system that can help customers building such systems and making the whole process much, much easier to control and overseeing all the financials within the organization. I think that would be the main topic.
Brilliant. So we're talking approvals, we're talking financial controls. I love it. So before we kind of get into Xero plus its ecosystem, Xero obviously has its native functionality. You know, what does Xero do well internally as a product when it comes to approvals? Gabriel, I'd love to come to you first before I come to Hilary.
Yes. So look, when I joined the Loss Explorer, which was not so long ago, actually was my first experience with Xero. So I have a fresh mindset, if you know what I mean. And what I observed that was working well, within Xero, they also offer HubDoc, which is basically like their in-house solution. And I know a couple of things that were working well. One is the OCR, which let's say was sufficiently and consistently working okay. Of course, there were some fallouts from time to time, but that was working well. And of course, the other benefit is the interface that it has into Xero, right? But that's a little bit implicit because it's their own solution, right? So it would be really strange if it doesn't interface. But that's basically it. What I remember that was working well. From a benefits point of view, I think that's mainly it. There were actually many things that were not working well or that require improvement, right? So for example, one of the things that really, from the beginning, that we observed is that there was no visibility to the users, because at the end of the day, it's not really us in finance. Most of the time, it's not us, the one with the need of getting an invoice paid, is the business, right? We're just the facilitators, right? So there was really no visibility for them at all, or very limited. And the process was very rudimentary, let's say, because in order for an invoice to get to HubDoc, it was first saved in a Dropbox folder. And then nobody knew what happened, right? In the business, I'm talking about from a business point of view, not from a finance point of view. Then from a finance point of view, it was a little bit difficult because we didn't know whether we already processed the invoice, whether it was a duplicate. How do we know if the person in the business just uploaded the invoice, but they didn't really review or approve, or they are happy with it? So, those are a little bit of the benefits and the things that were not working well in a nutshell. I can explain more, but that's basically it, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Hilary, over to you.
Yeah, I think Gabriel's actually really covered a lot of it really well. This difference between the needs of the operational team members and your finance team members, and everybody having different systems. A lot of it is based around folders, spreadsheets, manual bits of paper, and so on and so forth. But you've also got the thing that you might have people who've got specific responsibility for their budget holders for specific expenses or something like that. Maybe you've got something like inventory, which is sitting outside of Xero. So you've got a really big requirement beyond just the core finance function. And Xero has always been that core finance function and never claimed to be anything other than that, which is why it's always worked with an open API with all these other apps to integrate with it. So really it is, it's great if you just want a single step approval of your sales or your purchases or something like that. But for something more complex with more variables to it, and that's when you needed to start looking outside of Xero. But for core products, small team, simple one-step approvals where you can use some of the features of Xero for approving things, and even putting in, I think the question that came up was to do with planning dates for payments and so on. There are features within Xero you can use to facilitate that, but very often it's built around manual housekeeping that you have to manage yourselves.
It's funny. Every day during the calls with our customers, I'm hearing exactly the same thing from these customers. They're all explaining me this one very complex system when they first maybe do the OCR part with HubDoc, but then they have 10 or 20 different spreadsheets where they put different things. It all goes into one Dropbox, the other Google Drive, and things like that. To have multiple different sources where you can gather all of this different information, but not a single source of truth, where all the people or the financial and all the managers within the team, all the staff members will be able to easily navigate, see what's in there, and actually make their decision according to the data rather than just intuition.
Fascinating. And it comes through really clearly, and it's borne out across all of the other areas of this series, that there's great kind of core functionality in Xero, and it's about understanding what your complexities are. And here, from your comments, I think it's fantastically rich. We see where there's multiple steps involved in the approval process, where there's broader non-finance team members that need to be involved, where you've got information that by virtue of the size and the amount going on, there needs to be a kind of central visibility of everything that's happening. So look, that's incredibly rich, and I think we've covered really well there, both what Xero does well, but also what those growing pains are when it comes to approvals with Xero. I'd love to just touch on, before we move further, the point of, from what we've covered so far, is there anything there that is a clear signal, or indeed anything else that you've seen when it comes to approvals that's a clear signal that a business has outgrown Xero itself, and therefore should be thinking, we are now at a point where we need to move to an ERP system?
One of the constraints of Xero is always going to be transaction volumes, because they do have that limit, that soft limit on transactions. So that in itself could be an indication. There again, depending on the sort of transactions that are making you breach that, there might be an app that you could use to consolidate those transactions anyway. So I would say it's always, our approach to this is always to do a complete systems and processes review to map out what your requirements are. And then based on that, you can say, well, will Xero Plus apps fulfill that for you? Or are you still going to be left with gaps? So I would say, you know, the whole point with something like this, you've got to look at the system as a whole. You can't just look at the finance function. You can't just look at your stock system. You know, you've got to look at the system as a whole and then map it all out and have and invest that time and that money in doing that before you make a decision. It's not just, oh, Xero is not big enough anymore. You need to invest the time in developing that overview of the whole business.
Yeah, and also from my experience, there are 3 components that make companies to jump from Xero or QuickBooks, let's say, to larger ERPs. One, as Hilary said, is volume, definitely. The second is complexity, right? Xero is not built, I don't know, for big airlines, you know, or companies that are managing complex inventories and stuff like that. But the other one is reputation, because some companies, for example, when they grow and grow and grow, I don't know why they are afraid to say that they're still running their operation in Xero, right? It gives you more cachet, you know, if you're running on SAP or Dynamics, where even if you don't really need it, when it comes to competition, when it comes to go for IPO and stuff like that, it is reputational, right? Without additional benefits from a financial efficiency point of view, right?
Fascinating. Yeah. So I mean, the transaction limits and the complexities has come through really, you know, clearly across this series. But the reputational point, Gabriel, that's that's one we've not heard before. I think that's a really, really interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing.
Can I just add into that as well? I think outputs reporting requirements, which I think often gets overlooked in any system. You know, if you want anything more, so Xero is great if you've got your, you know, your codes, you've got two tracking categories and so on. But if you want more than 3 dimensions of reporting, that is the point at which you would need to look beyond Xero.
Amazing. So, bringing us back to Xero plus its ecosystem, we talked the growing pains before. When it comes to approvals, we'd love to hear what is possible with Xero plus its ecosystem. So, Gabriel, I'll come to you first. We'd love to hear, you know, the Lost Explorer, what you've been able to do from an approvals perspective.
Okay, but would you like to know now with ApprovalMax or before?
With ApprovalMax.
Okay, there are 3 benefits that we have, let's say, materialized, that we have observed so far. But I think that there are more coming in the future because we're planning to roll out the tool for other, let's say, processes. So what do I mean? What I mean is that we already rolled out in the whole company for the accounts payable process, which I would say is the entry level, and it's usually the pain point of many companies, right? And I probably most of the attendees and also you panelists, you can relate to this, right? So benefit number 1 is that it gave visibility to the individual with the need on what is the status of the invoice, so they can see whether the invoice has been approved or not. If the invoice has been approved, they can see whether it has been processed or not in Xero, because they know at the end it goes to Xero. And when it has been processed, it also gives them the visibility whether the invoices have been paid or not. So it's super good for the business, right? Super happy, right? No more Dropbox, no more jumping into the unknown. The other benefit from our point of view, from a finance point of view, is that we have some level of comfort and safety when it comes to the control environment, that these invoices have been reviewed and approved by the proper individuals in the business with the authority that we think it's required, right? So, and that's basically super important from a finance point of view. We all know why, but as strange as it sounds, we didn't have that comfort before, right? So that's super important. And what I meant by saying that we are going to roll out to other areas of the business, we're planning to do it by the end of this calendar year in the accounts receivable area. which is the next pain point, right? And we will be implementing one by one because there are many functionalities within the tool. But so far, these benefits that I briefly mentioned, they have really made a difference in the company, right? Big difference.
And when we talk about that difference, what is that difference? Is it time saving? Is it enabling you to do more as a business? What are we talking about here?
I think both. One is the time, the efficiency by itself, right? But the other one is that safety, right? The analogy that I like to use is the following. Let's say that you're working in marketing, right? And you're dealing with 5 vendors, just to put it easy. And of course, you need these vendors to get paid. You should have the same level of safety, the same level of confidence that these vendors will be paid as the same confidence that you have that your salary will be paid. That level of confidence, right? So for example, it is very unlikely that if you are an employee, let's say by the end of the month or whenever you should be paid, that you are doubting whether you will be paid or not, right? Usually it's a given. You will get your money on the 30, on the 15, whatever, right? So what I want to transmit to the business, which we have been able to do, is that you shouldn't worry. Your vendor will be paid on due time, right? Do not focus on that. Focus on growing the business. Focus on the marketing campaign, etc. So only that is a big benefit to the business, and the other benefit is the control environment, right? Which in reality, most of the business, they don't really, I wouldn't say they don't really care, but it's really not their priority. That's a finance priority, right? The control environment. And that's really hard to measure. I think I'm not in a position to really measure that, but we all know the benefits of having a business well controlled, right?
Sure. Amazing. Gabriel, thank you so much for sharing that. Hilary, I'd love to come to you in terms of the breadth of clients that you've worked with. What are some of the stories there of what they've been able to do on the approvals front?
Yeah, this actually leads on from what Gabriel was just saying about the whole control environment. So we work with a lot of not-for-profits, we work for large organizations where actually that control environment is really important. And that includes not just being able to prove to your auditors that you've got all of these controls in place and that they're being complied with. It's actually knowing that you haven't got management override and so on in there, which can happen in a large organization. So having the control environment in place to make sure all of that is covered by your systems is really important. Some of the examples of some of the people we work with, as I said, we mentioned we work for not-for-profits, we work for a few arts organizations. There you've got things like you've got budget holders, and it's very important for them that they know what their budget is and that they're still within their budget, but you've probably got a several step approval process in there, depending on the value of the purchase, and what the project is or something like that. So being able to control all of that and have that information at everybody's fingertips is really important. So we find that works well for not-for-profits, for commercial entities. And it's not actually just the purchase approval side of things as well. So for example, we've got a client who are using sales approvals and purchase approvals because somebody needs to raise a sales invoice, somebody else further down the line needs to approve it. So it's not just purchases, sales as well, but also it pulls to a fully integrated system where you're pushing the payments out to the suppliers as well. And particularly not-for-profits, a lot of them have very strict guidelines as to when they pay their suppliers. They guarantee they will pay within 14 days or whatever their terms are. They need to know stuff's not getting stuck in the system, so to hold up those payments to suppliers as well. So by having a sort of an end-to-end process that's covering all of that's meaning that they are satisfying the terms of their engagement with their suppliers as well. And from the finance point of view, I know it's a feature that ApprovalMax have been rolling out. You've got things like your journals and so on. One of the things that we once had a client come to us, they said, well, how do we get journals approved? Those sorts of amendment transactions. And it was like, well, actually, that's something that used to have to sit offline, but that can now be brought into the approvals process as well. So it's not just purchase, it's sales, it's payments, it's adjustments and so on as well. And it is making sure that you've got that evidence, that you've got that approval attached to the transaction to show what the audit trail was. And if something's rejected, then there's a process for picking that up and pushing it back through the system as well.
Now you're giving me ideas, Hilary. Because I was definitely planning to implement that for the sales process, as I mentioned. But for journals, I wasn't thinking, and I think it will be beneficial, right?
Yeah, and we
As
do
well.
have it now, actually. So you can
Yeah.
already give it a try and play around with the workflows just for the manual journal entries.
Yeah, indeed.
Amazing. Well, Hilary, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, well, you've clearly already seeded a takeaway for Gabriel there, and I'm sure you have for many other of our attendees. Alex, just over to you to kind of close us off when it comes to what Xero plus the ecosystem is capable of delivering when it comes to approvals. What are some of the stories that you've seen across your customers at ApprovalMax?
Sure, absolutely. Well, actually, Hilary and Gabriel already said this thing so well. I don't even know what to add, but these stories are actually coming daily. So we see lots of different industries. For instance, construction. They need to keep control over their budget. So they typically raise the purchase orders. They want to see if the goods was received. They want to match incoming invoices against the purchase orders. That is very common example how different customers from different parts of the world are actually using ApprovalMax. One of the stories that I really like, it's from one of our customers in Africa, and they're managing farms across the continent. So they have about 40 different farms across the continent. They have about 1,000 people working for them. And the process when they came to us was so strangely complex. They have 1,000 people, some on the field, trying to raise the purchase order via email late at night before going back to the farm early in the morning. If there is any mistake, it goes back, and it takes weeks to complete just a single purchase order. So it really takes lots of time, lots of efforts from people who shouldn't be actually doing those kind of things. What we've done, we've implemented a very complex workflow. It's 40 approval steps. I think that's the maximum I've seen so far, but again, it is possible. We spent maybe a week to build the whole thing. And since that time, the whole process reduced from weeks to just a couple of hours. A person who is on the field, they can raise the PO through our mobile app, submit it for approval straight away, and he will receive an answer within just a couple of minutes, saying if there is any mistakes and they need to change certain things, or if it's been approved and it's now being sent to the head office. So now they have this absolutely unified and streamlined process across the board. And it's, first of all, gives convenience to the people on the ground who is working on the farm, that they will receive their materials and they will receive their goods. It gives convenience to the people from the head office, knowing what's actually going on outside of their scope on the actual farms. And it gives much more streamlined process across the board. Everyone knows where the money goes, how much money we need to spend, you know about your commitments, and you can align that against your budgets. That is one out of thousands examples out there that I can think of.
Amazing. Well, look, and we're at 29 minutes, so we've run brilliantly to time. I'd love to come to our panel, for each of your top tips when it comes to scaling with Xero. So, Gabriel, I'll come to you first.
2 advices. So I will tell you of course, what worked for us. Number 1, explain in a very easy way what are the benefits to the business. So explain that to your CEO, explain that to your controller, and then sell it to the business. It's pretty easy to sell, but you have to explain that very well. And the second advice is that when it comes to the workflows, even though the interface of ApprovalMax to set up those workflows is very intuitive, even though it's very easy to do, the hardest part comes on the design of that, right? The design can be on a paper, can be on Excel, PowerPoint, whatever in your mind, but just invest some time on the design of that workflow so that when it comes to practice, it works well, and then it goes smoothly. So those are my 2 advices, let's say. We put a lot of thought, even though the company is not huge, and even though it worked well, I think that there was something that was not really working well in one of the workflows, and that caused a little bit of delays at the beginning. Was pretty easy to fix, and we all agreed. But my point is that if we probably have invested a couple more hours on the design, it would have been better. Like anything else, right? The more you invest on design, usually the better it gets. Those are my two advices, let's say.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hilary, over to you.
I would say it comes back to the thing we've talked about a lot is look at your system, not just the finance system, look at the business and say, where are we using spreadsheets? So get everybody around a table and get them all to confess what spreadsheets they've got tucked away on their own, on their desktop or wherever. And then use that to build what your system actually looks like. Not just not just with the finance bit in the middle. What does the whole system look like? Then you can work out how because apps were all created mainly to replace those spreadsheets, to replace those external processes. So if there's a spreadsheet, the chances are there's an app that will do that for you, which integrates with Xero. So spend that time, invest, as Gabriel says, invest the time and the money in creating what your business actually looks like.
Amazing. Alex, over to you.
Yep. I think my piece of advice would be, do not be afraid, talk to the vendors. We are here to help, and our system is designed just to help you create a better process. However, sometimes you might be a bit rigid against this new technology, against the new ways how we can optimize the process. We are here to help, and we'll be happy to hear, first of all, your thoughts, what are your challenges, and provide you with the best possible solution. Not only that, what Gabriel said, when it comes for the designing of the workflow and building those workflows, we're also here to provide you and give you guidance how to build those workflows in the best possible way. So feel free to reach out to us. It's not that someone will be just calling you all the time, telling, hey, buy our thing. It's not the thing. We want to help. That's when it comes for the win-win situation, when you actually can find the benefit of the product. That's where we can benefit from mutual business. It's not that for us just to sell something. It won't work out in this way. It's not a long-term strategy in that case.
Amazing. Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for that. I'm gonna briefly preview what's coming up over the next couple of days in the last two webinars in the series, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So tomorrow, we've got unlock features for scaling businesses in Xero itself with Steve Jarvis from Manufacture 2030, Heidi Seal from Business Sense, and Alistair Gardner from Xero. And then on Friday, we've got automating multi-entity month end with Harriet Hope from Marvelous, Lauren Harvey from Full Stop, and Griff and I from Mayday. And so it's been an incredible discussion today, really, really thought-provoking, and I've learned a huge amount from it. Got a couple of questions that have come through. The first of is around, so Gabriel, you touched on it a bit in terms of sort of educating the business around the benefits. Specifically, when it comes to sort of designing and implementing a new approvals process, who needs to be involved and what's the best way to train them?
It depends. What worked well for us is that we put together a chart, let's say like your typical chart of approvals chart, right? A table. So we came with a proposal that I presented to each of the business leaders. So I presented this to the head of marketing, the head of commercial, the head of production, the head of, all the heads. And they came up with their input, let's say, on what they like, what they don't like. Okay, so then once I finished that, I went to my boss, right? And then we came together with that proposal, which was already, looked by all of the leaders. And then she also proposed their changes. So basically, main topic here is to involve as much people as you can to the extent that is possible, right? If you're talking about a huge company, you don't want to involve every single person, right? It's not like, it's a little bit of democracy, but we also need to get things moving, right? So that's what works well for us, basically.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Alex, Hilary, anything from your side that you've seen work well, or equally things that you've seen work badly that people should avoid?
From my point of view, it's always got to be planned. You've got to plan what you're doing. You've got to map it all out. and and even when you map it out, you might find something. So give yourself time. Give yourself time before, rather than saying, right, we're going to do this and we're going to go live in a week's time. Give yourself time to trial it and so on as well, because there will be things that you won't have thought about. And it's not just about an approvals process. It's what happens if somebody's off, what happens to if someone's on holiday or whatever, what happens about delegating that authority and so on. You've really got to look at the whole position, the whole situation.
Yeah, 100% agree on that. Because though you won't break anything, even if you'll try to create your trial account and create a very maybe strange looking and not very logical workflow, it will work quite weird, but later you will make some additional changes. But it's better to invest some time at the beginning, maybe even with us, just to understand what is something that you're trying to achieve, trying to resolve, and maybe we can give you a guidance. Maybe we can go through this initial setup process, making sure that later, in case you want to make some minor changes, you will be able to do so without actually shrinking everything apart and building it all from scratch.
I think where we see people go wrong is so often people think with these apps, with Xero and so on, it comes across, it's going to be easy to use, it's going to be simple. So people just leap in and then wonder why they don't get the result. And then it's like, oh, it's rubbish, it's this, that, and the other. No, it's not. You just haven't taken the time to plan. So don't just leap in expecting it to work just like that.
Amazing. And you've both touched there on the final question that which was around that procurement process. What are the best questions to ask?
When we're looking at apps, we always look at how do you engage with the app vendor. So Alex has already said reach out to us. So talk to them. If you've got an idea of what it is you want to do, then and what it is you're trying to achieve, then you can have a much more informed discussion with them, because they are the experts in their software. And the good vendors are not going to try and sell it to you just for the sake of it. They want you to have a good experience of their product. So you do your research, you do your time investing in what you want to do, but then engage with the vendors and ask them the questions before signing on the dotted line.
Yeah, and just don't go with the first possible solution. I would suggest to compare that. Some vendors do not provide any free trials. I wouldn't go with that kind of approach because, well, you're not going to pay for something that's not going to work for you. Find the best on the market, give it a try, a free trial for all, maybe 3 or 4 different solutions in parallel, see which one works the best for you, because, well, some have specific strengths, the other ones don't have it. It's all very depends on the business side. It all depends on the structure and how the vendor itself talks to you and what type of support they provide to you. You will find a lot of those things, a lot of those nuances through these 1-2 weeks of the trial, and then you can make the actual purchase decision.
You have to know what problem it is you're trying to solve.
Correct.
Before you talk to them. If you haven't identified that problem, they can't tell you if they're going to be able to help you or not. So you've got to identify those problems before you engage.
Love it. Thank you so much to our incredible panel today for taking the time to share their insights. Thank you to everyone who's attended and your questions. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Look forward to seeing you across the rest of the series. You can register for the remaining webinars, as well as enjoy the recordings of all the webinars in the series to date at enterprise.getmayday.com. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you for
To you guys. Ciao.